After retirement, I bought a quiet farmhouse to finally live in peace. 3 days later, my son said, "We'll stay with you, Mom, all of us." I smiled through silence, but when he stepped inside that house, his smile froze at what he saw on the wall. Before I begin my story, tell me, from which country are you watching this?
Have you ever been betrayed by someone you love the most? My name is Elaine Harper, 68 years old, retired, and finally free from the noise of the world.
I'd spent 40 years of my life giving everything I had to my family, to my husband's dreams, to my children's future. And when they all left, silence became the only voice that stayed. 3 months after my retirement, I bought a quiet farmhouse outside Asheville, North Carolina, a small white house with a porch swing, a garden, and a field that caught the morning sun like it remembered warmth. I didn't want company anymore. I wanted peace. Peace from questions, peace from memories, peace from expectations. For the first time, I could drink coffee without someone asking where their socks were. For the first time, I could breathe. Then one afternoon, while I was watering the flowers, my phone rang. A familiar voice said, "Hi, Mom. It's me, my son, Daniel." I froze. It had been over a year since his last call. Last time we spoke, it ended with him saying, "You always choose guilt over logic, Mom." He hung up before I could say goodbye. That's how we said goodbye, in anger. And now here he was again after 12 months of silence. "Mom," he said, his voice soft and too polite to be natural, "we were thinking of visiting you. Me, Rachel, and the kids. Maybe stay for a few days." A pause followed, long and heavy. I smiled, though my hands trembled. "Of course, Daniel. I'd love to see you." "Great," he said, relieved. "We'll be there this weekend." I stared at the phone long after the call ended. Something in his tone wasn't love. It was convenience, the kind of softness people use when they want something. That night, I sat in the living room surrounded by photos. Daniel as a baby, grinning with frosting on his cheeks. Daniel at graduation, pretending to listen while I talked. Daniel's wedding, I was smiling in every picture, but I remember crying that day. His wife, Rachel, had shaken my hand like I was a guest, not a mother-in-law. I poured myself a glass of wine and whispered, "You left me for her, and now you're coming back for what I have." My voice didn't sound angry. It sounded ready. Because yes, Daniel, I am not the same woman you left. The one who begged for your visits. The one who sent money you never repaid. The one who stayed quiet when your wife said I was too emotional. No, I'm not that woman anymore. I have something they don't: time. And time sharpens people in ways pain never could. The next morning, I prepared the guest rooms, clean sheets, flowers, a picture of Daniel and his father placed by the bed. And on the living room wall, I hung something new, a large frame covered with a white cloth. When I stepped back to look at it, I smiled. This would be the first thing he'd see when he walked inside. It wasn't just decoration, it was memory, a reminder. The following afternoon, I received a message from Rachel. "We're excited to see you. Kids can't wait. Hope the farmhouse has Wi-Fi. Haha." I chuckled softly. Wi-Fi, of course, that's what mattered to her. Not the woman she'd ignored for years. Not the mother who raised the man she married. I closed my eyes and remembered the day Daniel left for good. The fight, the slammed door, the silence that followed. He didn't even attend his father's funeral.
Said he was too busy with work.
That day, something in me broke quietly. But pain, if you let it rest long enough, turns into precision. So yes, Daniel.
Come visit. Come see the woman who taught you everything, including how to hurt without shouting.
When Friday came, I woke up early. The sky was soft gray, the air cool. I baked a pie, apple, his favorite, though he'd probably forgotten. And then I waited. At noon, I heard tires on gravel. A black SUV pulled up. Shiny, expensive success parked at my gate. He stepped out first. Taller, older, but that same half smile he used to wear when lying. Rachel followed, sunglasses, perfume, perfect. The children, Evan and Lily, ran to the yard, laughing. "Mom," Daniel said, spreading his arms. I smiled, stepping forward. Welcome home, Daniel. He hugged me, light and brief, like he was afraid I'd hold on too long. Rachel kissed my cheek quickly. What a lovely place, Elaine. You've done so well for yourself. I smiled. Yes, I have. My tone made her glance at me twice.
When they entered the house, Daniel stopped.
His smile froze. On the wall, under the white cloth, hung a framed photograph, not of my family, but of him, as a boy, standing beside his father in our old house. Underneath it, in engraved letters, read, "We remember who built us." He looked at me, his eyes flickered, guilt, confusion, realization. And I said softly, "Welcome home, Daniel. You'll remember everything here." Part 2. The house remembers. 1,000 words. Daniel stood still, staring at the wall. Lips parted, but no words came out. Rachel shifted uncomfortably beside him. The children looked around, too young to understand why the air felt heavy. "Mom?" Daniel said at last, forcing a smile. "That's quite a picture." I nodded softly. "It's one of my favorites. Your father had such strong hands, didn't he?" He hesitated. "Yeah, he did. And you used to hold his hammer and pretend to fix things beside him." He looked away, pretending to admire the furniture instead. "It's a beautiful house, Mom." Rachel chimed in. "Yes, it really is. So calm. How did you manage this all by yourself?" "With time," I said, and a little bit of silence. Her laugh was light but uneasy. "Well, it certainly doesn't look like you've been lonely." I poured her tea. "Oh, loneliness teaches you how to decorate with memories." That evening, we ate dinner together for the first time in years. The table was old oak, the same one Frank built by hand before Daniel was even born. I'd polished it until it gleamed, so his reflection hovered on its surface. "So, Mom," Daniel said between bites, "we were actually thinking, maybe we could stay here for a while, help you out around the house, you know?" I raised an eyebrow. "Help me." He chuckled. "Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be doing everything alone. It's not good for your health." Rachel nodded eagerly.
Exactly. We can take care of things.
"You can relax." The words were sweet, but the tone was rehearsed. People don't offer to help unless they're trying to move in. I smiled politely. "That's kind of you, Daniel, but I'm quite capable. This old house and we take care of each other."
After dinner, I brought out the dessert.
Apple pie, the same recipe I used to make when Daniel was little. The smell of cinnamon and butter filled the air like a memory that refused to die. "Wow," he said, cutting a slice. "This smells just like when I was a kid." "It is the same," I replied softly. "Some things don't change, others do." He didn't look up. When the children finished eating, I told them about their grandfather. "Your granddad built this porch," I said, smiling. "He used to wake up at 5 every morning just to make your dad's breakfast before work." Rachel smiled awkwardly. "That's sweet." Daniel looked down at his plate. "Do you remember, Daniel?" I asked gently. "How we used to call you his little hero?" He nodded, barely audible. "Yeah, I remember." I leaned closer. "Then why weren't you there when he took his last breath?" The silence that followed was thick as fog. Rachel reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. "I couldn't come," he muttered. "You chose not to come," I corrected. The children looked between us, confused. I softened my tone. "Finish your dessert, sweethearts. Grown-ups just forget things sometimes." When everyone went to bed, I stayed in the living room. The photo on the wall seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight. I traced my fingers over the engraved words. "We remember who built us." Then I whispered to myself, "And who broke us?" On the table beside the couch, I placed a second frame, one Daniel hadn't seen yet. It was a faded letter Frank wrote to him before he died.
Unsend.
Unread. The ink had bled slightly, but one line was still clear. "Next son, don't forget where you came from. Everything I built was for you and for her." I knew exactly when Daniel would find it. Morning light had a way of showing what night tried to hide. The next morning, I made breakfast early. Pancakes, bacon, and orange juice, just like old times. When Daniel walked in, he noticed the letter right away. "Mom, what's this?" Something your father left behind, I said, pouring coffee. I think it's time you read it. He picked it up with shaky hands. Rachel hovered behind him, curious. When he reached that one clear line, his face fell. I didn't need to say anything. Guilt did the talking for me. After a long silence, he said, I didn't know he wrote to me. I know, I said softly. You weren't around to find out. He stared at the letter for a long time, then folded it neatly and slipped it into his pocket. I turned to the window and smiled faintly.
Round one complete.
That afternoon, the kids played outside while Rachel scrolled through her phone. Daniel stood on the porch, silent. I brought him a glass of lemonade. You built quite a life, I said. Big city, big house, bigger bills. He smirked. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not bad, I said. It's just interesting how success makes people forget who taught them to climb in. He looked away. Mom, why are you saying all this? Because, I replied, sometimes remembering hurts more than forgetting, and that's how we heal. He didn't reply, but I saw it in his eyes. The first crack, the boy he used to be, was waking up inside the man who forgot me. That night, I sat by the fireplace with Frank's photo. You see, love, I whispered, our son's home again, but this time, he's going to learn what love really costs. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the windows, not like a ghost, but like applause. The next morning began like any other. Sunlight spilling softly across the wooden floorboards, dust floating in the air like memories that refused to settle. I made breakfast early, again pancakes, the same way Daniel used to love them, but this time I didn't call him. I wanted him to wake up to the silence, to feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing against the walls. When he finally came down, his eyes were tired, as if the letter had kept him awake. You were up early, he muttered, pouring coffee.
Some habits never die, I said. He looked around.
This place feels different in the morning, I smiled. Houses, remember who loves them. He frowned slightly, but didn't respond. Rachel joined, cheerful as always, though the forced brightness in her tone was cracking. Mom, I was thinking maybe we could renovate a little, add some modern touches. I looked at her slowly, setting my cup down and erased the history. She blinked. Oh, no, I didn't mean. Of course you did, I interrupted gently. You've always been good at making old things look like they never mattered. Silence wrapped around the table like fog. Daniel cleared his throat. She didn't mean anything by it, Mom. I know, I said, smiling. That's what makes it worse. The rest of breakfast passed quietly, except for the sound of spoons against plates, a rhythm of restraint. After they finished eating, I told them I had a surprise. I found something yesterday while cleaning the attic, I said, leading them upstairs. The attic smelled like cedar and thyme. Sunlight cut through the dust as I lifted a small wooden chest from under an old quilt. This belonged to your father, I said softly. He kept things here I never touched. Daniel knelt beside it, his curiosity finally breaking through his pride. Inside were photos, his childhood drawings and a small brass compass. He picked it up carefully. He always said this pointed to what mattered, I reminded him. Do you remember what you said when you were 10? Daniel smiled faintly. That I didn't need it because I already knew my direction. Do you? I asked. The smile faded. He put the compass back without answering. Rachel touched one of the photos, Frank holding baby Daniel on his shoulders, both laughing. You look just like him, I said to Daniel, except he never forgot where home was. His jaw tightened. Mom, can we not do this again? Do what? I asked softly. Remember. He looked away, frustrated. A guilt had already begun to bloom behind his eyes. I closed the chest. Come downstairs when you're ready. The house will keep reminding you if I don't. That afternoon, I went to the garden to tend the roses. The air smelled of earth and rain, and for a moment, I thought of the years I spent planting things that never grew hopes, forgiveness, patience. Daniel joined me quietly. Mom, he said, I know I haven't been around much. Life gets complicated. Life doesn't get complicated, I replied, still clipping stems. People do. He sighed. You're angry. I get it, but I'm here now. I looked at him, really looked at him, the wrinkles around his eyes, the worry hiding behind his practiced calm. Are you here because you care or because you're curious about what I built? He froze. What's that supposed to mean? It means that sometimes guilt looks a lot like love when you don't know the difference. He didn't speak again, just stared at the ground while I returned to trimming the roses. When I went back inside later, I found Rachel on the phone, whispering sharply to someone. No, she's fine, but she's different, she said. I don't know. She's acting strange. It's like she's testing us. She looked up when I entered and forced a smile. Oh, I was just talking to my sister. I nodded. Of course you were. I set a tray of lemonade on the table and said, testing people isn't my job, dear. They test themselves when they're near me. She swallowed hard. I didn't mean you never do, I interrupted, my voice sweet as honey but sharp underneath.
But meaning and doing are cousins, Rachel. One always follows the other.
That evening, I made them dinner. Again, nothing fancy. Just stew the way Frank liked it. When Daniel complimented it, I said, your father used to say a meal cooked with love never needed salt. Funny how the simplest things stay true. Rachel smiled nervously. You really loved him, didn't you? Enough to forgive him when he failed, I said softly, but not enough to let my son forget who he was because of it. The silence at the table felt like thunder held inside glass. After dinner, Daniel took a walk outside. I followed quietly, watching him stop by the porch where Frank's old tools still hung. He touched the hammer, then the rusted wrench, then turned to me. You kept all this? Yes, I said. I keep everything that still remembers me. He sighed, almost breaking. You know, Mom, I came here because I wanted to make things right. But it feels like you already planned what I'd feel. I did, I said, because mothers don't just raise children, they raise consequences. He stared at me, speechless, the truth hitting harder than any shout could. I walked past him toward the house and whispered, Good night, Daniel. The house remembers. So should you. That night, as they all slept, I stood at the window, the moonlight spilling across the photo on the wall. It looked brighter somehow, as if Frank himself approved. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt something better control. My revenge wasn't cruel. It was quiet, patient, deserved. Tomorrow, I'd remind them again, but not with words this time, with proof of everything they chose to forget. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, heavy like the breath of a secret not yet told. I moved through the farmhouse in silence, every step measured, every sound intentional. Breakfast sizzled on the stove. The smell of coffee curled through the air like memory. Daniel came down first, shoulders tense, eyes red. You look tired, I said gently. Dreams, he murmured, about Dad. I smiled without warmth. Then maybe your father finally decided to visit. Before I could answer, Rachel appeared, lipstick, perfume, the kind of polish that belongs in cities, not on porches. Elaine, she began too brightly. Daniel and I were talking. Maybe we could help you handle this place. Pay bills, organize things, keep it all running properly. I turned from the stove slowly. That's thoughtful, I said. Whose idea was it? His or yours? She blinked. Ours, of course. Ah, I replied, sliding eggs onto plates. Because unity is always easier when there's profit involved. Daniel frowned. Mom, don't start. I didn't, I said softly. You did! The day you stopped calling me mother and started calling me by my first name. Silence folded over the table like dust. I served the food and sat opposite them, smiling the way a teacher smiles when a lesson is about to begin. You know, I said, this house doesn't like dishonesty. It has a way of showing what people hide. Rachel laughed, brittle and forced. It's just a house, maybe to you, I replied, but it's been listening longer than you've been breathing. Her fork clattered against the plate. Daniel rubbed his temples. Can we not do this again? I'm not doing anything, I whispered. I'm remembering. After breakfast, I excused myself and went to the old study, the one Frank built years ago. On the shelves were boxes of photographs, invoices, every proof of life that built this family. I chose one envelope, the deed to the farmhouse, written in my name alone, and left it open, on the desk, where Rachel would surely find it. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers on paper. By noon, Daniel was out with the kids, showing them the pond. Rachel wandered into the study just as expected. I stood quietly in the doorway, watching her read the deed, her lips tightening. I thought Daniel said the property was under joint ownership, she said carefully. He was mistaken, I replied. Everything here belongs to me. Everything you see, touch, breathe, even the silent. She forced a smile. That's impressive. No, I said, that's justice. I walked past her, brushing her shoulder lightly. You should know, Rachel, I built this life from ashes. You don't decorate over ashes, you honor them. Her eyes flickered. Fear, confusion, calculation. Perfect. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned, his laughter with the children echoing faintly before dying at the doorway. Rachel pulled him aside, whispering fast, but I could still hear, it's all hers. Every inch. Daniel's reply was low, guilty. I know, she earned it. I smiled from the kitchen. Guilt was a seed. I'd planted enough to watch it grow. Evening came soft and golden. We sat on the porch while the kids chased fireflies. Rachel poured herself wine. Daniel stared into the distance. You two look quiet, I said. Regretting the decision to visit? Not at all, Rachel lied smoothly. Just thinking how peaceful it is.
Peaceful things, I said, usually have a price. Daniel looked at me.
Mom, why do you keep saying things like that? Can't we just move forward? I met his eyes. Forward is for those who've paid what they owe. He swallowed hard, turned away. The wind moved through the trees with a sound like old laughter, Frank's laughter. For a moment, I almost softened. Then I remembered the nights I cried into cold pillows waiting for a call that never came. After dinner, I asked Rachel to help me in the pantry. She followed, hesitantly. Inside, the shelves were lined with jars, preserves, spices, old memories sealed tight. I picked up a jar of apricot jam. You know, I used to make this for Daniel's school lunches. He'd trade it for chocolate bars. He never valued what was made by hand. Rachel smiled weakly. Kids never do. Wives don't either, I said, turning to face her. At least not the ones who measure worth by what a man earns. She froze, her face pale. I don't know what you mean. You do, I said. And I think somewhere inside, you even feel sorry for it. Her eyes dropped. I didn't want to take him away from you. But you did, I whispered. And now you're here because you think you can take what's mine again. I stepped closer. You can't. She backed away, breath quickening. Elaine, this is getting uncomfortable. I smiled. Good. Growth always is. I left her there with the smell of dust and sugar, the air thick with truth. When I returned to the porch, Daniel looked at me, uneasy.
Everything okay?
Everything's finally starting to be, I said. The moon rose high, silver light spilling through the open window onto the wall where the photograph hung. The words beneath it seemed to shimmer. We remember who built us. I touched them softly. And who tried to break us? The house groaned lightly, the way wood does when it's proud. Upstairs, I heard Rachel crying quietly. Daniel pacing. Downstairs, I poured myself tea and looked out at the night. Revenge didn't feel heavy. It felt like balance. I wasn't punishing them. I was educating them. Tomorrow, I would show Daniel something his wife would never forget. A lesson written, not in words, but in walls. The kind that only a mother could teach. The next morning dawned brighter than usual. Sunlight slicing through the curtains, as if the house itself wanted to reveal something. I woke early, poured coffee, and sat in the study where Frank's old boxes still slept beneath the shelves. Dust rose in tiny storms each time I opened one, the air thick with the scent of paper and years. Inside a small tin box, I found what I'd been saving for the perfect moment. 3 letters, all written in Frank's familiar slanted handwriting. One addressed to me, one to Daniel, and one unsealed, meant for Whoever forgets where home is, I smiled. That one wasn't meant for me at all. It was meant for the people sitting in my kitchen pretending they'd come out of love. And Daniel came down. His voice was hoarse. Morning, Mom. I nodded toward the table.
You might want to read what your father left you, he frowned, walking slowly to the chair.
I thought I already read his letter. That one was about regret, I said. This one's about truth. Rachel appeared behind him, still sleepy, still pretending to belong. Daniel opened the envelope and began to read. The silence grew thicker with every line. Son, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. But remember, this house was never about land or walls. It was about hands. Your mother's hands built what I couldn't. Don't ever measure success by distance from her. Daniel's throat tightened. His fingers trembled. I watched quietly as guilt washed over his face like sunrise after storm. Rachel leaned closer, reading over his shoulder, her eyes darting nervously toward me. He really wrote that? She asked softly. He did, I replied. He knew what kind of woman I'd become and what kind of man his son might forget to be. Daniel looked up, tears threatening. Mom, please, Don't explain, I interrupted. Just remember, the house already forgave you. I haven't decided yet. He sat there silently, the paper trembling in his hands. Rachel placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, but even her sympathy looked staged. I turned to her. There's one more letter. Maybe you'd like to read it. I handed her the unsealed one, the one that didn't belong to anyone yet. She unfolded it, hesitated, then read aloud. To whoever forgets where home is, you'll think you can build bigger walls, buy louder laughter, and still sleep easy. But the day you walk into this house, you'll realize love never leaves. It just waits for you to see what you did to it. Her lips stopped moving halfway through. The words landed like stones. She stammered. This is cruel. Cruel? I echoed. No, dear. Honest. Daniel lowered his head into his hands. Mom, we came here because we wanted to make peace. I smiled faintly. Peace isn't a gift, Daniel. It's earned, just like pain. The children's laughter floated in from the yard, sharp and innocent, breaking the tension for a moment. They shouldn't hear this, Rachel said quietly. Oh, but they should, I replied. One day they'll grow up and learn what forgetting costs. She flinched. Tears forming. You've turned this house into a shrine of guilt. I stood slowly, walking toward the photo wall. No, Rachel, I've turned it into a classroom. I pointed at the framed picture of Frank and Daniel. That's lesson 1. What a father builds, a son should honor. Then at the letter on the table. The truth is heavier than inheritance. Rachel backed away slightly. And lesson 3, I turned, meeting her eyes. Lesson 3 is simple. Mothers forgive, but they never forget. She exhaled shakily, whispering, You've been planning this. Planning? I said softly, No, Rachel, living for it. I walked to the window, the morning light washing over my hands. You know what loneliness does? It polishes your memory until it shines like a blade. And when you finally hold it, you decide whether to cut or reflect. I turned to face them again. I chose both. Daniel stood slowly, eyes red, voice trembling. I was wrong, Mom. I left you when you needed me most. I didn't come back for money. I just didn't know how to fix it. You can't fix it, I said quietly, but you can feel it. That's the only way the wound learns it's still alive. He nodded, a tear finally falling. Rachel whispered, Elaine, please, let's not fight anymore. I looked at her kindly. Oh, sweetheart, this isn't a fight. It's forgiveness in motion. I picked up Frank's last letter, the one to me, and read aloud. If you ever feel forgotten, remind them gently that love built this home, not money. When they return, make them remember. I folded it carefully and set it beside the others.
I kept my promise, I said softly.
I made you remember. Daniel wiped his face, voice breaking. You did. He looked at Rachel, then back at me. I don't deserve this house. No, I said, you deserve the lesson. The rest of the day passed quietly. Rachel stayed in the guest room. Daniel helped me tend the garden without a word. As the sun fell behind the fields, he whispered, Dad would have been proud of you. I smiled. He always was. He just didn't live long enough to see me win. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the 3 letters on the table before me, their ink catching the lamplight. I didn't feel victorious. I felt restored. Revenge had never been about punishment. It was about remembrance. And tonight, for the first time, the house was finally silent, not from absence, but from peace. The morning after the letters felt softer, like the air itself was exhausted from holding so much truth. I woke before sunrise, the house silent, except for the creak of wood, adjusting to peace. When I came downstairs, Daniel was already in the kitchen, making coffee, something I hadn't seen him do since he was 16. He looked up, unsure whether to speak. "Morning," I said. "You remembered how to brew it." He smiled faintly. "Guess I remembered a few things." The bitterness between us had dulled overnight, replaced by something heavier, a gentler guilt learning to breathe.
Rachel appeared next, pale, eyes swollen from crying.
"Elaine," she said carefully, "I wanted to apologize. Yesterday I was defensive. I thought you hated me." I looked at her evenly. "I don't hate you, Rachel. I just needed you to see me." I opened, her shoulders sagged with relief. "I see you now," she whispered. "I really do." "Good," I replied. "Then you'll understand what comes next." She blinked, uncertain. I gestured toward the yard. "We're cleaning the barn today." She hesitated, glancing at Daniel, who nodded. The sun rose as we stepped outside, painting everything gold. The barn smelled of dust, hay, and memories. Cobwebs clung to the rafters like old regrets. "Your father built this after your first birthday," I said. "He said every man should leave behind something solid." Daniel touched one of the beams. "He did." "Then finish what he started," I said. "Make it useful again." He nodded and began sweeping while Rachel gathered broken boxes. The children played in the field, their laughter blending with the sound of broom against wood. For hours, we worked without speaking. Sometimes redemption doesn't need conversation. It just needs shared silence. When we finally stopped, Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead and looked around. "It feels different now," he said. "Lighter." "That's what happens when you carry the past out into daylight," I replied. He smiled weakly. "You always have a way of making guilt poetic," I chuckled. "Poetry is just pain that learned its manners." We both laughed softly. It was the first real laugh we'd shared in years. Rachel walked toward me holding an old wooden crate. "This was in the corner," she said. Inside lay a stack of Frank's old tools and a photograph of me, much younger, holding baby Daniel. "I didn't know this picture existed," Daniel murmured. "Your father took it the day he finished the porch," I said. "He said we were the foundation worth building for." Rachel stared at the photograph, tears forming again. "He loved you both so much." "He did," I said. "But love isn't proof against neglect. You can love someone deeply and still forget how to show it."
Daniel looked down. "I've been thinking about selling the city house," he said suddenly.
"It doesn't feel like home anymore." "Ooh." I raised an eyebrow. "Why the change of heart?" "Because home isn't a place that makes you feel important," he said quietly. "It's the place that makes you remember who you are." For the first time, he sounded like his father. The afternoon light drifted through the open barn doors, and for a fleeting second, it felt like Frank was standing there watching. I whispered under my breath, "You'd be proud of him now." Rachel heard and smiled. "He'd be proud of you too." I met her eyes. "Maybe. But pride isn't the same as peace." Later, as the day dimmed, we sat on the porch together. The kids were chasing fireflies again, just as they had the first night. Daniel leaned back, the lines in his face softer. "Mom," he said, "thank you for not giving up on me." I shook my head. "I did give up, Daniel. I just learned how to wait while pretending I hadn't." He laughed quietly. "That sounds exactly like you." "That's because you inherited my stubbornness," I said. Rachel placed her hand over his. "We're going to do better," she said. "We'll visit more." "Not because of guilt, because we want to." I studied her expression. For the first time, it wasn't rehearsed. "Maybe you finally mean that," I said. "I do," she whispered. Night settled around us like forgiveness made visible. The air smelled of soil and apple blossoms. Inside, the letters still sat on the table, but their power had changed. They weren't weapons anymore, just witnesses. I thought about burning them, but then I remembered Frank's handwriting and couldn't. Instead, I placed them in a small wooden frame and hung them beside the photograph. The words look softer now, like they'd done their job. Daniel noticed. You're keeping them? Of course, I said. Every home needs a reminder of what forgetting costs. He nodded, understanding. You're not angry anymore, are you? I smiled. Anger is heavy. I'm too old to lift it. The porch light flickered, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called, a sound both lonely and whole. I sipped my tea and whispered, this was never revenge, Daniel. It was memory returning to its rightful place. He looked at me for a long time before saying, then maybe we can start again. No, I replied softly. We don't start again. We just continue wiser. When they finally went inside, I stayed a little longer under the stars. The night breeze moved gently through the fields, brushing against the house like a lullaby. I closed my eyes and felt the walls settle into calm. The farmhouse had taught its lesson. Now it could rest. And so could I. The next few days passed in a quiet rhythm, the kind that feels borrowed from peace itself. Mornings began with the smell of coffee and the low hum of conversation, a sound I hadn't heard in years, without bitterness wrapped around it. Daniel fixed the porch rail, painted the gate, and helped me with errands as though each act could erase a year of absence. I let him. Sometimes silence is a harder forgiveness than words. Rachel helped too, though she was slower, more watchful. Every time our eyes met, hers lowered first. I noticed small things, the way she now called me Mom instead of Elaine, the way she cooked dinner without being asked. Guilt had taught her manners that affection never could. On the fourth evening after dinner, I found Daniel in the barn again, staring at the beam where Frank carved our initials long ago. Do you remember when you and Dad built this wall? I asked. Yeah, he said, smiling faintly. He told me the wood would outlive all of us. He was right, I said. Wood doesn't forget pressure. It just learns to hold it. He looked at me then, and I saw something different in his eyes. Not guilt anymore, but humility. I've been thinking, Mom, he said. Maybe we could all stay a while longer. Help you with the farm. Keep it running.
And what about your job? I asked.
He shrugged. They'll manage without me. Maybe it's time I manage with you. I turned away, pretending to check the shelves. I didn't want him to see the softness that crept into my chest. You know, I said, promises are easy when you're comfortable. Let's see how long yours lasts when comfort ends. He smiled. You mean you're testing me? Always, I said. It's a mother's duty. The next morning, I started early, waking the house with the smell of oatmeal and the sound of old jazz. Today, I announced we're going to town. Rachel looked up from her phone, surprised. Town? Why? Why? To meet people who remember, I said. She didn't ask again. We drove into Asheville, the streets alive with weekend chatter. I took him to the small bakery Frank and I used to visit when Daniel was a boy. The old baker, Mr. Wallace, still stood behind the counter, hair white as flour. Well, I'll be, he said. Elaine Harper, after all these years. He turned to Daniel. And this must be the son who used to steal my cherry buns. Daniel laughed, embarrassed. I did, didn't I? Every Saturday, I said, and I'd always pay double when you ran off. Mr. Wallace grinned. That's what mothers do. The words landed heavier than he knew. We stayed for coffee and cake, laughter, blending with nostalgia. Even Rachel softened, asking about old stories, listening without defensiveness. As we left, Mr. Wallace called out, "Good to see you together again. Don't let time win next time." Daniel smiled. We won't. On the drive back, I watched him through the rearview mirror. His shoulders looked lighter, as though the ghosts had loosened their grip. Back home, he carried groceries in without me asking, a small gesture, but a loud one in a language of change. That evening, I sat with Rachel on the porch while Daniel played with the kids. You love him, don't you? I asked. She nodded. I do. Even when I don't understand him. Good, I said. Just remember, Understanding comes after patience, not before. She looked at me, unsure whether I was scolding or forgiving her. I know I came here thinking about security, she admitted, but now I see. But now I see what he was missing wasn't money. It was this. She gestured toward the laughter in the yard. You, all of this. I smiled faintly. He forgot love is its own currency. I'm glad you're both learning the exchange rate. Rachel laughed softly, tears in her eyes. You really are terrifying, you know that. Only to people who think love is weakness, I said. The sun dipped low, turning the fields copper. Daniel came up the steps. Daniel came up the steps, breathless and smiling. Mom, you should have seen Evans throw straight across the yard. I saw, I said, sipping my tea. It's in the blood. Your father had the same arm. He grinned. Guess I finally inherited something worthwhile. You always had it, I replied. You just needed to stop running to find it. The night grew colder, and for the first time in years, I felt surrounded by warmth that wasn't forced. When the kids went to bed, Daniel joined me again outside. I don't know if I can ever repay what I took, he said. Don't, I told him. Just don't repeat it. He nodded slowly. I won't. Good, I said. Then maybe the house can stop haunting us. He chuckled. You still think this house remembers everything? Oh, yes, I said, smiling toward the dark window where our reflections shimmered. But now it remembers love, too. Inside, the clock struck 9, a steady heartbeat of second chances. I turned to Daniel one last time. If you really want to prove you've changed, I said, come back next spring. Bring nothing but yourself. No gifts, he asked, smiling. No guilt either, I said. Just come as my... I will. When he went inside, I looked at the stars. The sky above the farmhouse was wide and forgiving, just like the life I'd built from its soil. Revenge had ended days ago. What remained was reflection. Sometimes justice doesn't punish, it repairs. And as the wind brushed against my face, I whispered to Frank, they've learned, so have I. The morning of their departure came quietly, as if the house itself didn't want to wake. I stood at the kitchen window watching mist roll over the fields like soft breath. The car was packed, the children half asleep, Daniel pacing near the porch, while Rachel folded a blanket that didn't need folding. No one spoke for a long time. Even the clock seemed to tick slower, aware that every second was parting. You don't have to rush, I said finally. People waste the roads kinder after 9. Daniel smiled faintly. You always know how to delay goodbyes. No, I said. I just like giving them room to breathe. Rachel walked over, her eyes tired, but gentler than when she first arrived. Thank you for letting us stay, she said, for everything. You're welcome, I replied. But remember, gratitude is like flowers. It only means something if you keep watering it. She nodded, a tear slipping down. Daniel came closer, hands in his pockets like a boy caught between guilt and relief. Mom, I'll come back next spring, just like you said. I know, I answered. This time, don't bring anything but honesty. He laughed softly. You think I still need testing? Everyone does, I said. That's how we stay human. The children ran up to hug me, their small arms warm and real, the kind of love that doesn't ask for forgiveness because it never betrayed in the first place. I kissed their foreheads, whispering, take care of your father's laughter. It's rare. They giggled, not understanding, but carrying the words anyway. When the car finally started, gravel crunching under the tires, I raised my hand in quiet farewell. Daniel rolled down the window. I love you, Mom. For years, I'd imagined hearing those words again, but when they came, they didn't hurt, they healed. I know, I said, now prove it by living like you mean it. The car turned the bend and disappeared behind the orchard, leaving only the echo of engines and the smell of morning. I stood there until the silence became familiar again. Inside, the farmhouse felt different, not empty, but exhaled. The rooms held warmth instead of ghosts. On the wall, the letters still hung beside Frank's photograph. And for a moment, I swore the ink looked brighter. I walked closer, touching the glass lightly. "We did it," I whispered. "You can rest now." Outside, the wind picked up, lifting the curtains and carrying the scent of apples through the room. I made myself tea, sat on the porch, and watched sunlight break across the fields. For the first time in years, peace didn't feel like punishment. It felt like reward. Revenge had done its work not by hurting, but by healing. Daniel had learned, Rachel had softened, and I had remembered how to live without bitterness, filling the spaces love left behind. The kettle whistled again. I poured another cup just because I could. When the mail truck passed, I waved. The world kept moving, as it always does when a story finishes. I looked at the horizon, whispering to no one in particular, "He'll come back." And somewhere deep in the bones of the farmhouse, the wood creaked in answer, a gentle promise that some homes never truly let go of those who finally understood them. I leaned back in my chair, eyes half closed, letting sunlight paint my face. Maybe this was what peace really looked like, not the absence of pain, but its transformation into memory. I smiled, lifting my cup toward the quiet house. "Here's to second chances," I said. And the wind, warm and tender, whispered back. "And to mothers who make them possible." Spring came like a quiet visitor, soft and unannounced. The orchard behind the farmhouse shimmered with new blossoms, the kind that only bloom after long winters of silence. I spent my mornings walking through the field, touching the petals as if greeting old friends. It had been 3 months since Daniel's family left, and though the house was peaceful, it never felt empty. It breathed with their echoes, laughter lingering in the corners, small fingerprints on the kitchen jars, the faint smell of Rachel's perfume still hidden in the curtains. Every day I'd look at the road that curved past the orchard, wondering if a promise made in guilt could survive distance. Then one afternoon, the answer appeared in the form of a dust trail and the hum of a familiar engine. I didn't rush outside. I let the moment unfold like a memory returning home. When the car stopped, Daniel stepped out alone. No suit this time, no tension in his shoulders. Just a man carrying flowers and a simple smile. "You kept your word," I said, stepping onto the porch. "You thought I wouldn't?" He teased softly. "I thought you'd forget," I replied. "Forgetting runs in our family." He laughed, walking closer. "Not anymore." He handed me the flowers, wild tulips from the roadside. "Clumsy, but beautiful. Rachel and the kids are visiting her parents," he explained. "I wanted to come first. Just us." I nodded, accepting the gesture without words. We sat on the porch, the same chairs, the same view, but something in the air had changed. He looked out at the fields. "You were right, Mom, about everything." The city felt smaller after we left here. The house didn't feel like home. It felt like a hotel we'd stayed in too long. I smiled faintly. "That's how it feels when comfort stops meaning belonging." He turned to me. "I've been volunteering at a community center, fixing old houses for people who can't afford it. Every nail I drive in feels like an apology being hammered straight. I felt tears I didn't expect. Your father would have liked that." "I hope so," he said. He taught me with his hands. You taught me with your silence. The wind carried his words away like blessings. We spent the afternoon mending small things, the fence, the porch, swing, an old birdhouse Frank had built years ago. The rhythm of work replaced the rhythm of regret. At sunset, Daniel took out a small envelope and placed it on my lap. "What's this?" I asked. "Something I wrote after we left. I wasn't sure when to give it to you." I opened it carefully. His handwriting was uneven, raw. "Mom, You once told me revenge teaches people what words can't. You were right, but forgiveness teaches what revenge never could. I hope I've earned both. I folded it back slowly, my hands trembling. You have, I said. He smiled. I'm still learning. Good, I whispered. That's how you stay human. The sky deepened into gold and violet, the air filled with the hum of crickets. I poured us tea, and for the first time in decades, we drank together, not as debtors of emotion, but as equals of peace. Daniel leaned back, looking toward the orchard. He said, I used to think you wanted to punish me. I looked at him with a small smile. I did, but I wanted to save you more. You did both, he said softly, and I deserved both. Night fell gently, wrapping the house in warmth instead of weight. Daniel stayed the night, sleeping in his old room, the one that still smelled faintly of his childhood. I stood outside his door for a while, listening to his slow, steady breathing, the same rhythm I'd listened to when he was a boy who dreamt without guilt. Downstairs, I sat by the fireplace, tracing my fingers over Frank's photograph. He's becoming you, I whispered, only softer. The fire crackled in response as if agreeing. When morning came, Daniel was already awake, standing by the window with sunlight on his face. Heading out? I asked. In a bit, he said. But I wanted to ask, can I visit more often? Maybe bring the kids to help on the weekends? I smile. That's not a question, Daniel. That's what families are supposed to do. He nodded, his voice low. Then I'll see you soon. I watched him drive away, but this time the silence didn't sting. It sang. The house no longer held ghosts, just lessons turned into laughter. I sat back on the porch, tea in hand, tulips in a vase beside me, and whispered to the wind, this is how revenge ends, with peace wearing forgiveness's face. The wind moved gently through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, the old swing creaked a sound that no longer echoed sorrow, only memory learning how to rest. It's been 6 months since spring left its perfume on the windowsills, and Daniel drove away with sunlight on his shoulders. The farmhouse stands as it always has, quiet, proud, alive, but something inside it has changed. I can feel it in the way the floorboards sigh when I walk, the way the air no longer feels heavy with ghosts, but light with memory. The walls that once watched betrayal now hum softly with forgiveness. I spend my mornings on the porch, tea in hand, listening to the wind move through the orchard. The trees are taller this year, heavy with fruit. Maybe pain really does feed growth if you let it. Sometimes I catch myself talking to Frank out loud as if he's still leaning on the porch post, hat tilted, smiling that knowing smile. You were right, I tell him. They learned. So did I. The photograph of him and Daniel still hangs on the wall beside the letters, Frank's handwriting, fading slightly, but never disappearing. I've thought about taking them down, but then I remember forgetting is just another form of running, and I've done enough running for one lifetime. The mail comes every Thursday now, and Daniel's letters never miss a week. They're short updates about work, about the children, about how he and Rachel are doing, but every letter ends the same way. You were right about everything, Mom. Sometimes I laugh, sometimes I cry, but most days I just fold them neatly and tuck them beside Frank's where lessons belong. Last month they visited again, this time without guilt in their voices. The kids ran through the fields. Rachel helped me bake pie, and Daniel built a new swing where the old one used to hang. This time, he said, I'm building something that doesn't break. Watching him hammer in that final nail felt like closing a circle I didn't know was still open. The house has seen every season of my life, love, loss, revenge, and now rest. And I think maybe that's what all homes are. Witnesses that wait for their people to grow up enough to deserve them. Yesterday, I sat down to write something, not a letter, not a confession, just a goodbye. It starts the same way every story should. My name is Elaine Harper. I was a mother, a wife, a believer in silence. And I have learned that revenge, when born from love, is only another word for teaching. I don't know if I'll ever finish it. Maybe I don't need to. Some stories, and not with conclusions, but with contentment. This evening, the sun sank low over the hills, painting the farmhouse gold one last time. The light touched everything, my cup, the photograph, the walls, and for a moment, the whole house seemed to glow from within. I whispered to it, "Thank you for keeping me company." The wind answered with a soft creak, like the voice of an old friend saying goodbye. I know, deep down, my time here is almost done. The garden will outlive me. The letters will whisper to anyone who cares enough to read them. Maybe someday my grandchildren will come back, grown and curious, and the house will tell them my story the way I told Daniel his. I hope they'll learn faster. As the last light faded, I sat in stillness and realized something simple. Peace isn't found, it's made piece by piece, like a house built by hand and healed by heart. The porch boards cooled beneath my feet. The air smelled faintly of rain, and somewhere in the distance, a train sounded its low, endless call. I closed my eyes and smiled. "It's time, Frank," I whispered. "I'm ready." The wind rustled through the orchard one last time, soft as a sigh in the farmhouse. My final witness stood tall in silence, keeping every word, every memory, every forgiveness alive. Before I end my story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever forgiven someone not because they deserved it, but because you needed peace? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If this video touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional revenge and life lesson stories.